So in the last video, we explored the third major communication revolution in the industrial age. And this time we're taking a look at the fourth communication revolution, which is the one we're smack dab in the middle of. If you recall, the difference between the time when humans started vocally communicating and the time they started writing was about 1,995,000 years. Then the distance between writing and the invention of the printing press and mass production of communication was only about 3,500 years. Then the distance between writing and the Industrial Revolution was only about 400 years. Well, it's debatable as to when the Industrial Age officially ended. But if we take 1990 as the tail end of the third revolution of communication with the advent of the internet, and we look at the beginning of the fourth revolution as occurring sometime around the advent of social media and the increase in mobile technology, then we're only looking at about 10 to 12 years. The information age really began with the convergence or the combination of various technologies that came out of the third revolution, such as ever-shrinking size of electronics and the increasing efficiency and speed of mobile broadband. When you combine that with the advent of social media, we see greater changes in communication than ever before, and those changes are having a global impact. I like to call this revolution the age of distraction. It's been famously stated that trying to find information through the internet is like trying to take a drink from a fire hose.
You get to drink from the fire hose! Open wide!
So let's put this in perspective, because sometimes these numbers can be a bit overwhelming. Okay, so our computers and our phones, they all operate off of ones and zeros. Each one of these digits is called a bit. When we group 8 of these together, they're called a byte. 1,000 of these bytes is called a kilobyte, and a typical Word document might be a handful of kilobytes big. If we group 1,000,000 of these bytes together, then we have a megabyte. If I pull out my phone and I take a selfie, the resulting picture is probably around a megabyte. Group together 1,000,000,000 bytes and we have a gigabyte. So true story, my very first computer way back in 1996 had a whopping 4 gigabyte hard drive. And that was high technology at the time. Heck, I even dropped 3 bands on that thing.
I gotta do it, man.
While today, the cheap flash drive that I got from Walmart has 8 times that storage. When we group 1,000,000,000,000 of these bytes together, we call that a terabyte. And the cheap hard drive that I got at Costco to store all of my videos and movies has 4 terabytes of space. That is the most space I've ever owned in a single device up to this point. Let's go big here. This number is half a zettabyte. In 2009, that number was the entirety of data on the World Wide Web. In 2003, Mark Lieberman, a super mathlete, calculated that to digitally store in text file format the entirety of human speech ever spoken from the dawn of language up to that year would require about 42 zettabytes. That's more than 2 million years worth of
The jibber jabber. Don't be babbling like a fool. Say what you got to say. That's all. Then shut your dang pie hole.
From the dawn of computers in the 1940s up through the year 2025, humankind will have created and stored more than 200 zettabytes in less than a century. By that time, about 25% of all global carbon emissions will be directly related to the powering of data storage centers. The age of distraction hasn't increased the size of the fire hose spraying information at us. It's given our thirst a nearly infinite number of hoses from which to choose, and they're all on all the time. Today, as people use our channels of social media to share information and ideas with one another, it's created revolutions all over the world. The most famous of which is probably the Arab Spring, which happened in the early 2010s. This is when Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Bahrain, and Yemen all had mass revolts of people demanding democracy and demanding their politicians do better for them. We're also seeing new careers and new jobs emerge, jobs that didn't even exist 10 years ago. We've seen this revolution reinvent even the ways that we find love through apps like Tinder or Grindr. We've seen a massive revolution in music and literature and even video production, where anybody with an internet connection and meager technology can become famous overnight, regardless of their level of talent. We've even seen the human attention span drop to 6 seconds, while the average goldfish has a 7-second attention span, 1 more second than us. This explosion of information will no doubt have long-lasting effects on humanity. But at this point, nobody knows what the future is going to look at, which makes the study of communication right now pretty damn exciting. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how anxiety relates to communication, particularly with respect to public speaking. So stick around, and we'll take a walk through this revolution together.